Video contains violent content, details that are not suitable for common perception. Please consider before watching. Chapter 185, Submission 4. From now on, treat Mok Jung-un the same way you treat me. At the unexpected order that came out of Wai So-yun's mouth, everyone looked at her with surprised expressions. Naturally, they thought she would say she wouldn't forgive Mok Jung-un for damaging the faction's reputation through this incident, but they couldn't understand what was going on. Everyone was at a loss for words, and Wu Horang, who could be considered the representative of the loyal subordinates and one of the 5 tigers, carefully opened his mouth. Young lady. When you say to treat Mok Jung-un the same way as the young lady. It's exactly as I said. Treat Mok Jung-un as a superior. But young lady, even though the subordinate's mistake is grave, if we just overlook this incident. Are you objecting? At her sharp voice, Wu Horang couldn't hide his perplexity. Until before this incident, Wai So-yun was someone who freely listened to her subordinates' opinions. No, even if not, as he was the chief disciple of Bright Blade King Sun Yun, one of the 5 kings, she had always respected his opinion in any situation. But her attitude had changed. Is she disappointed in me? Is she showing this attitude because she's really angry about this incident? When he thought that the woman he loved had become cold towards him, Wu Horang's chest felt stuffy with bitterness. However, if he had given up because of this, he wouldn't have loved her in the first place. Wu Horang knelt on one knee, clasped his hands together and said, "How could a subordinate object to the young lady's order? However, please allow me to at least ask the reason for making such a decision." At his words, Wai So-yun stared intently at Wu Horang and then glanced at the other loyal subordinates. They also had expressions of wanting to know the reason. Judging that it wasn't like she wouldn't tell the reason even for an arbitrary decision, she said, "I joined hands with Mok Jung-un." "What? You say you joined hands? Does that mean Mok Jung-un has agreed to come under the young lady's command?" Wu Horang asked in surprise. It was Mok Jung-un who had accepted his challenge and openly insulted her, saying she wasn't qualified to be a leader. So he thought they would never work together. But the surprise didn't end there. "Not under my command." At Wai So-yun's following words, everyone's expressions stiffened. What does she mean by not under her command? As they were puzzled, Mok Jung-un and I joined hands as equals. So regarding the treatment of him, young lady. Before she could finish speaking, Yip Wai-sian, Sun Yun's disciple, shouted as if he couldn't stand it anymore and got up from his seat. Then he said, "Even so, this is unacceptable. Young lady, how could you treat that guy?" Smack. Ugh. Yip Wai-sian, hit by a flying ink stone, clutched his chest and groaned in pain. To him, Wai So-yun coldly said, "I clearly said not to object, but you're disrespecting me to the end. That's not it. Get out." "What?" At her words, Yip Wai-sian couldn't hide his perplexity. "Young lady. What do you mean? A subordinate who pledged loyalty doesn't listen to the Lord's orders at every turn and does as he pleases. I no longer need someone like that." At her words, Yip Wai-sian's face turned pale. He had never seen Wai So-yun take such a hard stance before. The shock was brief and Yip Wai-sian bit his lip hard. Then he soon opened his mouth with a wronged expression. How can you do this to me? For the young lady's sake all this time. Shut that mouth. Young La Dash. That. Ugh. Before he could say something, someone slammed Yip Wai-sian's head to the floor. That person was none other than Wu Horang, Yip Wai-sian's eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother? Be quiet. Wu Horang, who had scolded him softly, soon lowered his head and said, "Young lady, please forgive him. I will strictly discipline my foolish junior. Thinking of all this time, please give him one more chance." When Wai So-yun didn't say anything, Wu Horang gripped Yip Wai-sian's head tightly and urged, "Can't you hurry up and apologize to the young lady? Please forgive me." Looking at them like that, Wai So-yun let out a faint sigh and said, "This is the last time. If something like this happens again, Yip Wai-sian, you will no longer be my person. I will keep that in mind." Yip Wai-sian's expression wasn't good as he answered while prostrating. He knelt because of her sternness, but for him, this incident was like a humiliation. Yip Wai-sian also loved her no less than Wu Horang and wanted to make her his woman. When he thought that the woman he wanted so much had humiliated him in front of everyone, he was furious. Grit. Me and eldest senior brother. If master doesn't help her, that wench will have no opportunity at all, so how can she act like this? He thought he would be able to control her as he wished with time. But now it was hard to even expect that. His feelings of love had already turned into resentment. Then Gi Okurayan, the eldest daughter of Sun Rock Valley Master Gi Hei, carefully said to her, "But young lady, following orders is not that difficult, but if you want to clearly establish the hierarchy as you said, shouldn't Mok Jiongun also pledge loyalty to you as the next successor? Right? No matter what, how can that guy be on equal footing with the young lady?" Gioke Ryan is right. At this sharp point, everyone looked at Wai So-yun with agreeing expressions. Then she slightly turned her head to the side and answered in a small voice, "I will handle that myself." At her answer, everyone couldn't understand it all. Why was Wai So-yun trying to treat that arrogant bastard so well without even pledging loyalty? However, unlike them, Gi Okurayan's expression looking at Wai So-yun became strange. She had been close with Wai So-yun since childhood. Perhaps because of that, she could read Wai So-yun's emotions better than anyone else. "Are you feeling shy right now?" It might not be noticeable to the men's eyes, but Gi Okurayan noticed. Just now Wai So-yun had acted shy. On the surface, it wasn't apparent, but that expression only appeared at times like this. For a moment, Gi Okurayan's eyes slightly widened. Could it be? Gi Okurayan looked at Wai So-yun. Her face, which seemed to be sternly treating everyone as if trying to properly establish discipline, had the corners of her mouth slightly raised and looked unusually radiant and beautiful compared to usual. Gi Okurayan's mouth fell slightly open. Oh my! He was convinced. Wai So-yun's reaction. It was definitely an appearance that could only come out when she liked someone. And it didn't seem to end with just simple love. They say a docile cat climbs the fireplace first. She acted as if she had no interest in men at all, but look at this. It was truly surprising. She felt like asking about this and that, not as a relationship between a lord and subordinate but as a friend. What on earth happened while they were unconscious? Then her expression soon changed. Ah. Thinking about it for a moment, wasn't this a good thing in a way? Gi Okurayan's gaze turned to Wu Horang. She loved Wu Horang. The only one who knew this fact was Wai So-yun. The reason she had told her was because she had developed a suspicion that Wu Horang had feelings for Wai So-yun that he shouldn't have as her lord. So she deliberately revealed her feelings to Wai So-yun. She thought that even if Wai So-yun as a lord knew about the affection of the man she loved, she wouldn't covet him. Did it turn out well? Gi Okurayan's eyes looking at Wu Horang sparkled. In the rear courtyard of the estate's guest hall. There Yip Wai-sian said to his eldest senior brother Wu Horang, as if he couldn't contain his anger with a flushed face. "Eldest senior brother. Does this make sense? Not only that Mok Jiongun bastard, but now she's even joining hands with young Master Jang Nung. What the—" "Be quiet." Wu Horang scolded him softly as his voice got louder. Wu Horang's expression wasn't very bright either. He was already troubled by the young lady's first declaration, but to make matters worse, his head became complicated because she said she would join hands with the Jang Nung AK faction, the force they were competing with most fiercely. Why is she doing this? It was utterly incomprehensible. Although her force was the most behind, it was still unknown. He couldn't understand the reason and it was unpleasant, but if she had joined hands with Mok Jiongun, it was practically the same as gaining the support of the Baek clan led by Shadow Clan and the King of Poison. In that case, she was rather in a superior position compared to the Jang Nung AK faction. With just this, her approval rating reaches nearly 30%. If she could gain the support of either Corpse Blood Valley, which was still maintaining a neutral position, or the power of the last of the five kings, she might even be able to compete sufficiently with the eldest young master's side, which had the support of the Elder Council. But why? Was there a reason to join hands with young Master Jang Nung AK? Young Master Jang Nung AK was never someone who would compromise. Rather, he would hope for them to come under his command, but he would never join hands. Wai So-yun clearly knew that too, so he couldn't understand. As his mind was complicated like that, an unexpected remark came out of Yip Wai-sian's mouth. "Eldest senior brother. I think our choice was wrong." "What? This isn't right, is it?" "What's not right? And what do you mean our choice was wrong?" "I thought there was a possibility if we assisted her, given the young lady's lack of skills and her nature of valuing talented people. But the current young lady's vision has darkened as if someone is blocking her view. At Yip Weixian's words, Wu Horang sighed. This guy seemed to have taken what happened earlier quite personally. Of course, from his perspective, it could be disappointing, but it wasn't right to criticize the lord he had pledged loyalty to because of today's incident alone. So Wu Horang scolded him softly. Don't speak recklessly. It's not right to blame the lord just because you don't agree with her order. And doing that is like belittling our own choice. Aren't you angry, eldest senior brother? Angry. We are the young lady's loyal subordinates. But no matter how angry she is about this incident, using the hierarchy as an excuse to decide everything according to her will, and even treating eldest senior brother and me who have supported her for a long time like this. Stop it. Don't. If the young lady says she will come under young Master Jiang Nungake's command, will you follow that without question? That's. If she tells you to leave for opposing that, will you accept it? If she draws a line every time like this, not allowing us to even offer advice as subordinates, isn't that just the conduct of a tyrant? I can't tolerate this situation. I think I should report this matter to Master and consider whether to continue supporting her or not. You're going too far. This time Wu Horang's voice rose. Then Yip Weixian quickly took the lead, clasping his hands together in a salute. Let's leave the conversation here. Rather, Master told me to bring eldest senior brother, but I forgot because of that Mok Jiangun bastard. What? Why are you telling me this only now? Like eldest senior brother, I was knocked out by that bastard, so when did I have a chance to tell you? At Yip Weixian's words, Wu Horang clicked his tongue. And he was inwardly worried. Although he felt that his relationship with Wei Soyun had become somewhat awkward due to today's incident, he couldn't help but be concerned that he might cause trouble and drift further apart from her. So Wu Horang warned Yip Weixian. I'm saying this just in case, but don't act rashly when you go to Master. You really? As he was about to scold Yip Weixian, someone called out to them. You two haven't left yet? That someone was none other than Ji Okarayan, the daughter of Sun Rock Valley Master Ji He. When Ji Okarayan came, Yip Weixian shut his mouth. There was no one among the loyal subordinates who didn't know that she was practically Wei Soyun's right-hand woman. So Yip Weixian, worried that she might have overheard their conversation or seen through his true intentions, tried to move. I was about to go. Let's go, eldest senior brother. All right. Wait a moment, brother Wu. Wu Horang, who was about to leave with Yip Weixian, stopped. When Yip Weixian signaled for him to go, Ji Okarayan smiled and said, It will only take a moment, so you can go slowly first. Sigh. At this, Yip Weixian shook his head and left the courtyard first. Then Wu Horang asked, Why are you doing this? I just wanted to tell you not to be too heartbroken because of what happened today. Heartbroken? At Ji Okarayan's words, Wu Horang asked back in puzzlement. Then Ji Okarayan widened her eyes, tilted her head and said, Aren't you okay with it? What do you mean by that? It seems the young lady has marked Mok Jiangun as her partner. Didn't you notice that too, brother Wu? What? At her words, Wu Horang's eyes changed. They became much fiercer than before, should I say? Seeing his reaction, the corners of Ji Okarayan's mouth twitched slightly, but she soon hid it. Ji Okarayan played dumb and covered her mouth with both hands, saying, Oh my, I didn't know. You didn't know. What the? That's. Wu Horang's voice trembled. In that voice there was disappointment and a strange anger. Seeing him like this, Okarayan said as if perplexed. I thought you and the others all knew. I guess I was wrong. It seems I made a thoughtless remark. Even while saying that, her eyes didn't leave Wu Horang. She couldn't miss this opportunity. To make him realize that his feelings for Wei Soyun were futile and to have a single chance to get into his heart. If she missed this, she wouldn't be able to make this man hers. Click clink. A cold-looking girl wearing thin chains all over her body like clothes appeared. With her short hair and half of it dyed white, her strange appearance made both Go Chan, who possessed Jiang Nungaike, and Wei Mengqion, who possessed Ho Zhang Hyok, unable to hide their inner tension. That was because Blue Spirit. They could instinctively tell that this girl's spirit's rank had reached the blue spirit level. As spirits with lower ranks, they naturally couldn't help but feel a strange fear beyond wariness. Go Chan carefully asked Mok Jiangun, Master, Who is this girl? Girl? Who are you calling a girl? The girl suddenly glared at Go-chan and raised her voice. Despite the simple action, the chilling and tremendous spiritual power made Go-chan unconsciously flinch and take a step back. This young master is a man. A man. Where does she look like a man? Anyone would see her as a girl. However, take it easy. As Mok Jae-eun warned. Master. The girl immediately clung to Mok Jae-eun and rubbed her face against him like a cat. Mok Jae-eun pushed her away with an expressionless face. Then the girl said with a disappointed expression, I've waited for a long time. At this half-white-haired girl's remark, Mok Jae-eun, as if not caring at all, pointed to the people lying on the floor and said, Gyu So-ha. Yes. The girl was none other than Gyu So-ha, the spirit that was born from Gu poison at the cliff of Corpse Blood Valley. Mok Jae-eun continued. Possess a useful body among them. That person over there seems good. The person Mok Jae-eun pointed to with his finger was a muscular man with his face buried in the ground. He was Ko Yun-hoo, one of the 5 tigers, the best-reared disciples of the Heaven and Earth Society. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Gyu So-ha, who had been carefully examining Ko Yun-hoo, soon made a disapproving expression and said, Master, can't I have one of those 2 instead? The 2 Gyu So-ha pointed to were none other than Ha Chai-rin, who was kneeling and blinking with a puzzled expression, and Seo Hye-in, the leader of the Grass Smoke Group and the 4th mountain of the 5 Mountains Alliance. At Gyu So-ha's words, Chong Ryong, who was watching inside the wooden puppet, clicked her tongue and said to Mok Jae-eun, "Pee that you fool. I told you this wench is a girl." Chapter 186, Pinnacle 1. Hee. Gyu So-ha, who ended up possessing the body of the female 4th Mountain Grass Smoke Group's leader Seo Hye-in according to her wishes, snickered as if satisfied. Seeing Gyu So-ha like that, Chong Ryong clicked her tongue. I don't understand how she can insist that she's a man while being so happy. Indeed. Mok Jae-eun shrugged his shoulders. In fact, it didn't matter to him whether Gyu So-ha was a woman or a man. He just needed a card that could move as he wished. By the way, what are you going to do? Regardless of the process, it seems you've gotten the factions of the second disciple Jang Nung-ak and his junior sister Wai So-yun under your control, just as you intended. Not completely yet. Why do you think so? We can only say we've succeeded in merging the 2 groups when we can move the real powerhouses. At Mok Jae-eun's words, Chong Ryong said as if impressed. Oh, is that so? Isn't this the natural course of action? Yes. You're right. The Greenhorn subordinates may follow their master's orders, but the real ones are different. The real ones Chong Ryong was talking about. It didn't refer to the loyal subordinates of the 2 successors. The majority of the subordinates were disciples of the next generation who would take responsibility, but currently, the executives behind them were the real power holders. If we try to hastily merge the 2 forces, we may face opposition from the elders behind them. Indeed. The subordinates following Jang Nung-ak or Wai So-yun are disciples of the next generation of similar age. Unless it's an extraordinary case, they have no choice but to move according to their lord's will. However, as Chong Ryong said, the executives were different. If it goes against their interests, they are likely to react differently. Do you have a plan for that? Well, what do you think is the best way? At Mok Jae-eun's question, Chong Ryong asked in puzzlement. Are you asking seriously? Yes. Are you seeking advice from me? Yes, that's right. Oh, the sun must be rising from the west. You're the one who doesn't even listen to the advice I give and does whatever you want. You seem more familiar with handling an organization than I am. Am I wrong? Humph. You're talking nonsense. Chong Ryong, who was looking at Mok Jae-eun while within a wooden puppet, seemed surprised. Judging by his actions, she thought he might act on his own until the end. But at some point he had started adopting her advice little by little. Especially in matters of handling an organization like this. This guy. He may have the qualities of a leader too. It was an unexpected aspect. The Mok Jae-eun she had been watching so far was close to a lone wolf who never trusted others. But as he began to face enemies with an organized force, his judgment and insight were gradually rising to match it. This was truly the quality of a leader. A leader doesn't just lead an organization with pressure or stubbornness, but must be able to contemplate and discern the situation with a broad perspective and utilize talented individuals in the right place at the right time. Without realizing it, Mok Jae-eun was gradually doing that instinctively. Is it not just his martial arts that are growing? He's a truly peculiar fellow. Usually, when one thing is outstanding, another tends to be lacking, but it was strange to the point of being remarkable that he was growing in various aspects. To her, who inwardly found him admirable, Mok Jong-un said, "If there's no particular plan, move people. Move people? Yes. How? No matter how much you run around alone, it's difficult to make the elders behind them move as you wish. But if you move people, it will become a bit easier. It doesn't seem to click with you. There's a good example related to this." "What is it?" "When that old king of poison said he would clean up his surroundings and talk to the Shadow Clan master about the current situation and pursue an alliance, what did you do?" "I asked him to do it." "Yes. Didn't you entrust that to the old man and do what you had to do?" "That's right. That old man is not your servant spirit, nor do you have any leverage over him, so why did you casually entrust that to him?" Mok Jong-un didn't continue. It was because he realized what intention Chong Ryong had in saying these words. When Chong Ryong said to move people, it wasn't with a simple intention. The true meaning of her words was, "Is she telling me to trust?" Mok Jong-un never trusted others. That's why, until he became a death row inmate, he didn't trust anyone and moved alone. But at some point the situation changed. It was because he encountered the limit of his own strength. If the one he considered an enemy had not been a martial artist or someone associated with a huge organization like the Heaven and Earth Society, he would have still tried to solve everything alone. However, now it was different. He realized that he needed various cards to face a huge organization. Trust. Mok Jong-un's eyes narrowed. He was aware that he needed various cards, so he was gradually increasing the number of servant spirits. However, there was something he realized while newly turning spirits into servant spirits this time. It was that he couldn't infinitely increase the number of servant spirits. Oh, there was one more. He thought only one spirit was born among the martial artists on the terrace, but two entities were trying to be created at that time. So Mok Jong-un tried to make that one spirit a servant spirit as well. However, he couldn't. It was because the karma wasn't formed. As I thought. What do you mean by that? Karma is literally like forcibly connecting fate. Fate is inevitable and like the yoke of law, so it would be stranger to infinitely increase it in the first place. Is there a limit? If karma could be endlessly connected, that would rather go against inevitability. Mok Jong-un couldn't understand the enlightenment of the dead because he wasn't dead. However, what was certain was that the act of increasing servant spirits itself was close to going against inevitability in law, so there had to be restrictions. In conclusion, there was a limit to the number of servant spirits that could be maintained. Therefore, there was a limit to increasing the number of cards that could be utilized by increasing servant spirits. No other way? As Chong Ryong said, in order to increase the cards, that trust might be somewhat necessary. Mok Jong-un chuckled as he thought about this. The fact that he, who could never absolutely trust anyone, was contemplating trust in others to increase the cards he could utilize. Chong Ryong said to him, "You're quite peculiar too. How can someone who needs to move people not be able to trust people? Is it a contradiction?" "Contradiction. Yes, that's a word that suits you well. But suddenly I'm curious. About what? Why is it that you can't trust people?" "Who knows? Do I have to trust them?" At Mok Jong-un's dry response, Chong Ryong clicked her tongue inwardly. A peculiar brat. If he had been betrayed by someone he trusted like her, it would be understandable. What was the reason why a guy who had barely lived a youthful age couldn't trust others to this extent? Simply because he had a way of thinking that deviated from ordinary people? Of course, that could be the case. Considering his appearance that she had been observing so far, he was full of irregularities and surprises. But somehow it didn't seem like that was all. I'll know if I keep watching. What he ultimately wanted to do was revenge. If she watched the process of that revenge, she would be able to understand why Mok Jong-un couldn't trust people to this extent. Until then, well, whether you trust someone or not is up to you. But in order to organically move an organization, you need to have some level of trust. Since you say that, I'll keep it in mind. Then what's the best way to do it? What do you think is the most important card on Jang Nung-ak's side? It would be Ho Jong-hyok's master. Ho Jong-hyok's father, or the Axe King Ho Tae-gang, was one of the 5 kings and the 8 stars considered the top masters of the current Central Plains martial world. Yes. He would be the main pillar of the forces supporting Jang Nung-ak. If he moves, the others will naturally have no choice but to follow the trend. That's right. So move the Axe King through Hojong Hyuk. That makes sense. Why Mengqion was possessing Hojong Hyuk. As a servant spirit, Why Mengqion had no choice but to move according to Mok Jiongun's orders, so he would be helpful in persuading Axe King Ho Taegang, the father of that body. The problem is not Jang Nung-ak's faction, but Wai So-yun's faction. That seems to be the case. The biggest supporter and main pillar of Wai So-yun's faction. You wouldn't be able to like him even if you wanted to. The biggest supporter of Wai So-yun's faction. He was Bright Blade King Sun Yun, one of the 5 kings. As Chong Ryong said, the most tangled relationship since entering the Heaven and Earth Society was with Bright Blade King. He had also refused when Bright Blade King said he would accept him as a disciple, and his relationship with his disciples Wu Horang and Yip Weixian was close to bad karma. Even Bright Blade King Sun Yun's newly accepted disciple Mok Yucheon was like that. Mok Jiongun shrugged his shoulders and said, "Not everything can go smoothly. You don't think it's the grave you dug even if you die soon? Is there any meaning in arguing about what has already happened?" Anyway. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue. Then she soon said, "Anyway, it's obvious that even if you move, the relationship will only worsen, so move someone else. It seems his disciples are already like that." There was no way Wu Horang or Yip Weixian would move for Mok Jiongun's sake. Moreover, since he had made Wai So-yun his woman, if they found out about that, they would have even more antipathy. It would be better to persuade through the Shadow Clan Master or the King of Poison. Through the Shadow Clan Master or the King of Poison. Yes. It would be easier to persuade if a fellow executive moves. But the King of Poison would be better than the Shadow Clan Master. You should know well why, right? At Chong Ryong's words, Mok Jiongun chuckled. It was because he understood her words. The Shadow Clan Master had also confronted Bright Blade King Sun Yun at the Corpse Blood Valley succession ceremony to obtain Mok Jiongun. If he stepped up and asked Bright Blade King to help the 2 factions join forces, would it even work? Then I'll have to move quickly. The night wasn't very long. He had to quickly establish an alliance system before the eldest young master Na Yulriang regained consciousness. Mok Jiongun, who had left Jang Nung-ak's residence, hurried to head to the King of Poison Baeksaha's estate. However, on the way there he encountered a martial artist from Shadow Clan running towards him out of breath. "Young master. You were here?" Mok Jiongun asked in puzzlement. "What's the matter?" "The Shadow Clan Master is urgently looking for you." "Pai Master?" "Yes, it's a very urgent matter, so he told me to bring you right away." "An urgent matter? What on earth was it that he was like this? Could it be because the King of Poison Baeksaha had talked about the incident with the eldest young master Na Yulriang and suggested forming an alliance? But now he had to go find Baeksaha first and talk about Bright Blade King Sun Yun. So Mok Jiongun said, "I understand. For now, a moment. You have to go right now. It won't take long." First. Before Mok Jiongun could even finish his words, the martial artist from Shadow Clan said impatiently, "No. You have to go right now." "Ah, this is quite troublesome. I'll return to Shadow Clan soon." "It's not Shadow Clan." "What?" "Right now, the Shadow Clan Master is paying respects to the society leader at the main hall of the inner city." At his words, Mok Jiongun's expression changed. The Shadow Clan Master was paying respects to the society leader of the Heaven and Earth Society and urgently called for him? In the end, this meant, "Can I meet that person?" Mok Jiongun had tried to enter the factions of the successors in order to create an opportunity to contact the society leader. But unexpectedly, the opportunity for a meeting had come. Chapter 187, Pinnacle 2. Mok Jiongun followed the martial artist from Shadow Clan towards the main hall of the inner city. Not long after, Chong Ryong, smoking a long pipe, flew to his side. She said to Mok Jiongun, "Hey you fool. I've told Go-chan." "Thank you." Mok Jiongun sent a sound transmission to her. Since he couldn't go right away, he sent Chong Ryong to give orders to Go-chan, who possessed the body of the society leader's second disciple Jang Nung-ak, to send someone to the King of Poison Baeksaha instead. Chong Ryong clicked her tongue and said, "Anyway, when it comes to revenge, you don't consider the consequences." In fact, when the opportunity to meet the society leader arose, Mok Jiongun had tried to find Baeksaha to ask him to persuade Bright Blade King Sun Yun without hesitation. So Chong Ryong had stepped up and said she would relay the message through Go Chan. Mok Jae-eun casually replied to her rebuke. The chance to see the society leader won't come easily. Humph. Your judgment is clouded because your mind is elsewhere. It's fine since you helped. What's fine? Anyway, even if you meet the society leader right now, what do you think you can do? Who knows? Oh please. People. Even if he's ill, he's practically the pinnacle of the current martial world. Do you think you can get the answer you want from him right away? Mok Jae-eun had one goal. To hear about the ghost sword's connection to the society leader or his identity. Of course, Mok Jae-eun didn't think this was possible right away either. However, through this opportunity he couldn't miss the chance to gauge what kind of person the society leader was or how strong he was. Pinnacle. The six heavens called the pinnacle of the current martial world. The society leader was one of those six heavens. He was definitely curious, not just for clues to his revenge. Among the countless martial artists, he wondered how much of a gap there would be between himself and the one called the Pinnacle Grand Master, the Supreme Master. Chong Ryong said to Mok Jae-eun, who was thinking that, "Mortal. Yes. This time I'll clearly warn you. If the six heavens, the pinnacle of the current martial world, have crossed the wall of walls as I expect, you must never provoke them." You seemed very concerned. Do you know what it's called to cross the wall of walls? Who knows? It's called the Profound Realm. 1. Profound means the heavens or the supreme. It means reaching the highest realm that cannot be touched. The realm that cannot be touched. Yes. Of course, your current level is also a realm that ordinary martial artists wouldn't even dare to dream of. But the profound realm is on a completely different level. At her words, Mok Jae-eun's eyes narrowed. Judging by her warning to this extent, the realm of the profound seemed to possess unimaginable power in martial arts. Perhaps he shouldn't let his guard down. Not long after moving like that, Mok Jae-eun finally arrived in front of the main hall building of the inner city, following the martial artist from Shadow Clan. He thought he would go inside, but, playing. The two martial artists guarding the entrance of the main hall crossed their spears and blocked him. Mok Jae-eun asked the martial artist from Shadow Clan in puzzlement. "Didn't you say I need to come to the main hall?" The Shadow Clan master definitely said that. The martial artist from Shadow Clan also looked puzzled as if he didn't know what was going on. So Mok Jae-eun clasped his hands together in a salute and said, "Excuse me. I am Mok Jae-eun, the disciple of the Shadow Clan master. Right now The disciple of the Shadow Clan master?" Before Mok Jae-eun could finish speaking, one of the martial artists guarding the entrance of the main hall asked. "Yes. That's right. We were waiting for you. Follow me." Fortunately, there was no mistake. The martial artist from Shadow Clan who had finished guiding him bid farewell and left. Mok Jae-eun followed the martial artist who had been guarding the entrance into the main hall. However, why are we not going upstairs but entering through the corridor instead? He knew that the size of the inner city's main hall building was the largest within the Heaven and Earth Society, but seeing the considerably long corridor continuing, it seemed to be larger than expected. The martial artist who had been walking down the corridor turned to the right and led him to a passage that seemed to lead outside. Entering there, a very wide space was revealed. Where is this? There were numerous weapons and training tools everywhere. Seemed to be a training ground. What was peculiar was that it seemed to be made so that no one could recklessly intrude or leave, with thick walls blocking all four sides. However, one of Mok Jae-eun's eyebrows slightly rose. He had naturally assumed that he would be led to where the Shadow Clan master and the society leader were. But waiting here were not them, but young men who seemed to be in their mid to late 20s. A young man with a handsome appearance in his mid-20s wearing a red leather belt was sitting cross-legged, and another man in his late 20s with thick muscles was leaning against the wall, chewing on something that looked like a rice cake. So Mok Jae-eun asked, "I don't see master." "No, the Shadow Clan master. I was told to wait here." "By the Shadow Clan master?" "No." "Then by whom?" "It was the society leader's order." "The society leader?" "The society leader told him to wait here with them?" It was difficult to guess what was going on. While he was puzzled, the martial artist guarding the entrance left as if his business was finished. It was a truly strange situation. If he had told him to stay alone, that would be one thing, but telling him to wait with unfamiliar people without any introduction. Since he couldn't understand the reason, he had no choice but to wait. Then the young man in his late 20s who had been leaning against the wall eating the rice cake approached and said, "Wow. So you're the famous disciple of the Shadow Clan master." Mok Jae-un silently stared at him. Then the young man in his late 20s held out the skewer with the rice cake and said, "Want some?" "I'll pass." Mok Jae-un lightly shook his head. Then the young man chuckled and pointed to the young man sitting with his eyes closed, saying disapprovingly, "At least you seem more communicative than that guy." "And who are you? Me? Or that guy?" "Either one. It would be great if you could tell me about both." Then the young man shrugged his shoulders and pointed to himself with his thumb, saying, "I'm Seop Chun, the captain of the 3rd Guard Unit of the main hall." "Captain of the main hall guard unit?" At his introduction, interest flashed in Mok Jae-un's eyes. This was information he had heard not from the Shadow Clan master, but from the leader of Corpse Blood Valley, Lee Ji-young. The place with the thickest military power in the inner city is none other than the main hall. Is it because the society leader is there? Yes, the society leader is the center of the Heaven and Earth Society after all. I see. Do you know roughly how strong they are? It's difficult to grasp the hidden power, but counting only the revealed forces, there are 3 guard units in the main hall, each consisting of 30 men. 30 men? Even if you add them all up, it's only 90. That's smaller than I thought. The number was smaller than he expected. As if he knew Mok Jae-un would react that way, Lee Ji-young said, "At a glance you may feel that way, but each one of them is an elite." Elite. Yes. Although they are called units, each individual is a peak realm master equivalent to the captain level of an ordinary unit, and those captains possess the martial prowess of a great elder. The guard captains are at the great elder level. The gap is clear. Yes, the guard captains are originally people who have no problem becoming great elders. Come to think of it, the most recently appointed captain of the 3rd Guard Unit is from Corpse Blood Valley here. From here. That's right. Thanks to you, my liege, that friend came to mind. Thanks to me. Yes. Like you, my liege, that friend also obtained 3 top disciple tokens from the gates 8 years ago and exited as the top disciple. 3. He must have done well. It was very difficult to obtain even 1 top disciple plate from the Corpse Blood Valley gates. Obtaining more than 2 could be considered truly exceptional. At Mok Jae-un's words, Lee Ji-young said quite seriously, "It's not just doing well. He's quite an oddball, so he gave up at the last few gates, but if he had put his mind to it, it wouldn't have been strange for him to receive all the top disciple tokens." Wouldn't have been strange to receive them all? Yes, he stopped at that level because he gave up voluntarily, but that friend's talent can definitely be called a genius. Interesting. What's that friend's name? Seop Chun. I heard he's also part of the 5 Tigers, who are called the most outstanding rear disciples in the sect. Mok Jae-un, who recalled the conversation with the leader of Corpse Blood Valley Lee Ji-young, looked at the face of Seop Chun, the captain of the 3rd Guard Unit of the main hall, with interested eyes. There were only 2 people the leader of Corpse Blood Valley Lee Ji-young had praised for their talent. One was the eldest young master Na Yul-riang, and the other was none other than this Seop Chun. Oh no. The top disciple junior of this Corpse Blood Valley class is staring at me so intently, I don't know what to do with my body. Seop Chun covered his muscular chest with both arms and said. At this, Mok Jae-un chuckled. He had only heard praise about his talent, so he didn't know what kind of person he was, but he seemed to have a very outgoing and humorous personality. Mok Jae-un, who quickly looked him over, was puzzled to see the sword case at his waist. It looks light. Although it was in a sword case, it seemed to be about 4 feet long. But even the sword case looked very thin, so the sword itself seemed to be quite light. As if sensing Mok Jae-un's gaze, Seop Chun said, As expected of the disciple of the Shadow Clan master, you have a lot of interest in swords. A muscular person is carrying a very light sword. You have good eyes. You don't need good eyes to see that. Swish. As soon as Mok Jae-un finished speaking, the sword had already come out of the scabbard. As expected, the sword looked very thin and light. It even felt like it was fluttering. However, despite such lightness, the faint luster flowing from the blade showed that it was no ordinary sword. Mok Jae-un stared at the blade and muttered, "Mad Dance." On the inside of the sharp blade, the characters from Mad Dance were engraved. At Mok Jae-un's mutter, Seop Chun showed his teeth and said, "That's this friend's name." This friend. Yeah. For a swordsman, the sword is a lifelong companion. Of course it's a friend. Is that so? The reaction is less interesting than I thought. I even showed you my friend, but... Hey, you're the disciple of the Shadow Clan master. That's not a sword. Seop Chun said in a puzzled tone, looking at the sword case at Mok Jaeongun's waist. Mok Jaeongun casually replied, "It's a gift from my master." Your master, you mean the Shadow Clan master? Yes. That's quite unusual. The Shadow Clan master should be a swordsman, but he gifted a sword to his disciple? Then it must not be an ordinary sword. It's a pretty useful sword, he said. Oh. Is that so? What's that friend's name? As Seop Chun kept referring to the weapon as a friend, Mok Jaeongun chuckled and replied, "The evil commandment." The evil commandment? What? Suddenly Seop Chun couldn't hide his surprise. It wasn't just him who was surprised by this. The handsome young man who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed opened his eyes and frowned, looking at Mok Jaeongun. Their reactions were natural. Whether they were swordsmen or sword masters, who in the martial world wouldn't know about the evil commandment sword? It was a demonic sword made by the legendary craftsman Oh Yezi. Seop Chun said as if dumbfounded. No way. Is that really the evil commandment sword? Yes. Ha. Seop Chun clicked his tongue inwardly. As far as he knew, although the evil commandment sword was a masterpiece made by the craftsman Oh Yezi, it was a cursed weapon known as a demonic sword. He gave such a dangerous thing to his disciple. No matter how great the sword was, he couldn't understand giving him that which had a high risk. So Seop Chun asked, "Is that sword okay?" "Yes, is there a problem? Like gradually losing energy or seeing things that aren't there? You're worrying a lot." "No. What is there to worry about when we just met for the first time? It's just that even though it's our first meeting, that sword seems to be very good but also very, very dangerous." "Have you mastered the sword?" At that moment someone interrupted. It was the young man with the red belt who had been sitting cross-legged. As the young man intervened, Seop Chun, the captain of the 3rd Guard unit of the main hall, raised one eyebrow and said, "Is the guy who didn't even answer once when I talked to him so much opening his mouth because of a sword?" Naturally, he thought it was understandable. No matter how demonic the sword was, as a swordsman he couldn't help but be interested. However, ignoring his words, the young man said to Mok Jaeongun, "I asked if you mastered the sword." To that question Mok Jaeongun shrugged his shoulders and replied, "To some extent." "To some extent?" At that answer the young man snorted. Then he uncrossed his legs, stood up and opened his mouth. "Then it's a pearl necklace on a pig's neck." At those words that came out of the young man's mouth, it wasn't Mok Jaeongun but Seop Chun who shook his head and said, "A pearl necklace on a pig's neck? Well, that's harsh. No matter what saying that at the first meeting is." The young man paid no attention to Seop Chun's words. So, feeling uncomfortable, Seop Chun made a disgusted expression and said to Mok Jaeongun, "Just ignore what that guy says. He's just jealous. A sword in the hands of someone who hasn't properly mastered the sword is nothing more than a decoration. So what else can I say but a pearl necklace on a pig's neck?" At the young man's continuing words, Seop Chun said as if dumbfounded, "Hey, even if you're the vice leader's son, you're going a bit too far. Take it easy, will you?" The vice leader's son? Mok Jaeongun looked at the young man. If he was the vice leader's son, was he that person? He had heard of him before. Vice leader Mong Seocheon had twin children, Mong Seohai and Mong Muyak. The young man in front of him couldn't possibly be the daughter Mong Seohai, so he must be Mong Muyak. What a coincidence. And Mong Muyak was also one of the 5 tigers, called the best reared disciples of the Heaven and Earth Society. In other words, 2 of the 5 tigers were gathered here. Why did they call him together with these people? As he was thinking about that, Mong Muyak approached Mok Jaeongun and said, "Leaving aside the demonic sword, do you think you deserve to carry such an excellent sword? This guy doesn't know moderation." Seop Chun clicked his tongue. He knew well that Mong Muyak was crazy about swords, but he didn't expect him to pick a fight with Mok Jaeongun, whom he was meeting for the first time in this way. Based on his long observation, that guy wasn't doing this because he coveted the sword. He literally disapproved of Mok Jaeongun having that sword. This will lead to trouble at this rate. Seop Chun thought he should stop Mong Muyak. Even if he was the top disciple at the Corpse Blood Valley Gate, His opponent was one of the best reared disciples who had received the vice leader's teachings. If he got involved in this fight because he was in a bad mood, he might suffer a big. Hey, take it easy. I think I deserve it more than you, don't you think? Huh. Seop Chun turned his head in surprise. It seemed Mok Jae-un had fallen for Mong Muyak's provocation. But for someone who had fallen for the provocation, Mok Jae-un had a smiling face. So, more than me. Rather, Mong Muyak showed his discomfort. Judging that this would lead to trouble, Seop Chun stepped between the two to dissuade the situation and said, "Stop it, you two." At that moment, Mong Muyak's hand suddenly reached for the hilt of the sword at his waist. Then he tried to swiftly draw his sword, but, bam! Before he could even draw half of the sword, something blocked it. It was none other than Mok Jae-un's palm. Mong Muyak looked at Mok Jae-un with surprised eyes. To him, Mok Jae-un said with a sneer in a whispering voice, "If you're slower than a pig, are you a maggot?" Chapter 188, Pinnacle 3. Half a quarter hour ago, Hwan Yisian, the Shadow Clan master, stood in front of the entrance to the society leader's bedchamber with a somewhat tense gaze. When was the last time? It had been quite a long time since he had seen the face of the society leader, whose illness had deepened. He hadn't seen the society leader for so long that he gave orders through the vice leader, even to him, the head of Shadow Clan in charge of secrets. But unexpectedly he had been summoned abruptly. So he couldn't help but be inwardly puzzled. However, there was one thing he could guess. Could it be that the vice leader's side found out? If that's the case, it becomes quite troublesome. How much effort had he put in to prevent that information from reaching the society leader? He hoped that what he was worrying about wouldn't happen. Creak. At that moment, the door to the residence opened. The one who opened the door was none other than Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian. But the Shadow Clan master managed his expression and clasped his hands together in a salute with a smile. Oh ho ho! Greetings to the Vice Leader. At his greeting, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian showed no particular reaction. Rather, he looked at the Shadow Clan master with a strange expression. Then, why didn't you bring your disciple? My disciple is out on an errand for me, so I sent a subordinate to bring him. Then come in. Before he could even finish speaking, Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian turned his body and gestured. At his appearance that seemed much colder than usual, the eyes of Hwan Yisian, the Shadow Clan master, narrowed. He thought that his concern might become reality. It's troublesome. He couldn't make a move yet because he hadn't secured the exact location and a perfect escape route. In the meantime, if the society leader finds out about it, the situation will end up thoroughly twisted. If that happens, Hwan Yisian clenched his teeth slightly. Then he soon entered the residence with a smiling face, covering his mouth. The society leader's residence, where a few lamps were lit, was a place he had been to many times, but today the entire interior felt heavy and chilling. There was no way the air in the residence of a sick person could be cold, and it was probably because the tension had grown. Step. The footsteps were heavy. Although he maintained a smiling face, his stomach was about to churn. The other party was the leader of the Heaven and Earth Society, one of the 6 heavens, called the pinnacle of the current martial world. Facing him had to be uncomfortable no matter who it was. On the large bed attached to the wall of the spacious residence, there was a thin cloth hanging down so the inside could be seen dimly. Swish. The vice leader stood in front, clasping his hands together and said, "The Shadow Clan master has arrived." Cough cough. A coughing sound came from inside. At this, Hwan Yisian, the Shadow Clan master who was standing behind the vice leader, hurriedly clasped his hands together and lowered his head. "I pay my respects to the society leader." The eyes of Hwan Yisian, who was bowing his head, narrowed even more. He was already curious about the extent of the society leader's condition. But hearing the scratching sound mixed with the coughing, it seemed like the illness was still the same. Strange. Why is the illness of such a master like the society leader himself is lasting so long? Is it certain that he suffered incurable internal injuries from that person? Only a very few people in the organization knew about this. The reason why only a very few people knew was obviously because the society leader's internal injuries were more severe than expected, and because they ultimately failed to gain the upper hand in the confrontation with that person. But even so, it was too long. If a person was an inner master with profound internal energy like the society leader, He should have been able to heal his own internal injuries by this point and still have plenty left over. It was at that moment when he was finding it strange. Shadow Clan Master. It was the society leader's voice that he heard after a long time. Yes, please speak. Do you perhaps have something to say to me? For a moment, the expression of Huan Yixian, the Shadow Clan Master, hardened. He thought there would be some prior discussion about the reason for calling him, but he didn't expect for the man to suddenly come at him like this. However, Huan Yixian did not easily expose his emotions in such situations. Ah. Is your illness a bit dash? The Imperial Palace. It was before he could even finish speaking. With just one word, Huan Yixian's throat felt blocked. What he had been worrying about had happened. He had tried so hard to confuse the information so that the vice leader's side wouldn't notice, but it seemed he couldn't stop it after all. It was reckless. If it weren't for the Imperial Palace, he could have bought more time. But it seemed he had missed that opportunity. As he was quickly thinking about what to do, the voice of Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian, who was in front of him, was heard. Don't tell me you're saying that the information department of our esteemed organization, the Shadow Clan, have no knowledge of what you found out? Damn it. There was no room for evasion. They already found out. Testing him like this was a kind of trial in itself. The society leader was that kind of person. If it came to this, there was only one way. Huan Yixian, the Shadow Clan Master, raised his head, smiled brightly and said, "Oh ho ho. How could that be? This subordinate has also obtained information of that person being detained in the Imperial Palace." As soon as he finished speaking, the vice leader slightly turned his head, glared fiercely and said, "But why didn't you report it? This is quite troublesome." Troublesome. The vice leader is speaking as if I deliberately hid it. Huan Yixian spoke in a tone as if he was offended by being suspected. Then the vice leader snorted and said, "Then what's the reason you haven't reported the fact that you knew that person is being imprisoned in the Imperial Palace's Golden Jade all this time?" So this is how it's going to be. Seeing how he was interrogating and pressuring him, it seemed he was indeed called because of suspicion. There was no other way now. Huan Yixian said calmly without losing his composure, "Do you really believe that's true?" "What?" The vice leader frowned. What if it's information deliberately spread by the Imperial Palace to lure in the remnants of the Fire Faith Order? At these words from Huan Yixian, the Shadow Clan Master, the vice leader was momentarily at a loss for words. This was also a gamble for Huan Yixian. From his position as a real remnant of the Fire Faith Order, it was better not to talk about the Fire Faith Order as much as possible, but now he had no choice. Otherwise, it was obvious that the vice leader would press him even more. Fortunately, he's not convinced of the information yet. It seemed the vice leader had not obtained definite information. Like himself, it seemed he had only obtained information that that person was being detained in the Imperial Palace's Golden Jade. So he could push a little more. As the head of the information department, if I report unconfirmed information, I have to take responsibility for it. Naturally, I have to carefully verify the authenticity. Verification is unnecessary. The one who cut him off was none other than the society leader. At this, Huan Yixian hurriedly bowed his head as if apologetic and said, "But society leader." Cough cough. There's not much time left. What? What on earth does that mean? There's not much time left? It was right then. Look at me. Swish. The thin cloth was lifted, and the society leader revealed himself from the bed. The two eyes of Huan Yixian, who unconsciously raised his head to look at the society leader, widened. What the hell is this? Half a quarter hour later. In the training ground of the secret wall inside the main hall. If you're slower than a pig, are you a maggot? This bastard. The surprise was brief, and at Mok Jiangun's sneer mocking him, Mong Muyak's eyes turned fierce. However, unlike how he started the fight first, Mong Muyak was a very cool-headed person. So in a short moment he analyzed Mok Jiangun. The energy I felt from him is only at the peak realm level at most. But this series of movements and the strength pressing the tip of the sword are beyond that. That meant he had concealed his energy. Realizing this, Mong Muyak inwardly clicked his tongue. He had heard that the person in front of him had graduated as the top disciple from the Corpse Blood Valley Gate, but the boy was only 17 years old, and considering the level of the previous rear disciples of Corpse Blood Valley, Mong Muyak had expected Mok Jiongun to be at the proficient stage or at the pinnacle stage of peak realm at most. But if this bastard could deceive his own energy sensing to this extent, I'll have to consider the possibility of his real level to be more than I expected. Bam. Mong Muyak, who judged that Mok Jiongun might have higher martial arts than expected, soon shifted his weight back with his footwork, making his center of gravity unbalanced. Then naturally Mok Jiongun's body, which was pressing the tip of the sword, also leaned forward. At that moment, bam! Mong Muyak swiftly kicked towards Mok Jiongun's neck as he leaned forward. If the guy has a narrow field of vision, he would get hit by this, and if his martial prowess is indeed higher, he would have to avoid the kick and let go of the sword hilt to prevent himself from leaning forward. However, grab. Mong Muyak's prediction was off. Mok Jiongun, who had been pressing the tip of the sword with his palm, grabbed it and, swoosh, he seized it and swung it. As a result, Mong Muyak's body, which had been holding the sword hilt while kicking, staggered to the side and was forcibly twisted. But it didn't end there. Mong Muyak drew upon his inner force to resist this, but, whoosh, damn it. Nevertheless, Mong Muyak's body was swung even more strongly and soon, whoosh, along with letting go of the sword hilt he was holding, he was sent flying nearly 8 steps away. Although startled, Mong Muyak calmly twisted his body in the air to regain his posture. But, skid 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 skid. He was pushed back nearly 7 steps on the ground, unable to dissipate Mok Jiongun's inner force. Watching this with wide eyes, Seop Chun, the captain of the 3rd Guard unit of the main hall, clapped his hands and cheered. Clap clap clap. Gwaha. Good. Very good. Inwardly he had thought that if trouble occurred, Mok Jiongun would naturally be the one to suffer. It had to be that way because Mong Muyak was the son of Vice Leader Mong Xiaoqian and the grandson of Bright Blade King Mong Wuzhang, who had retired before joining as an elder in the Elder Council. Seeing Mong Muyak being pushed back by a newcomer who wasn't even the same age as him, let alone the same 5 tigers, after receiving teachings from a supreme master who was considered one of the top 5 even including the previous and current generations, Seop Chun couldn't help but feel excited. Grit. Of course, Seop Chun's cheers were enough to stimulate Mong Muyak's pride. Although he was the one who picked the fight first, he had his own reasons. It was because he thought Mok Jiongun had insulted the sword. He really didn't like the fact that a disciple of the Shadow Clan master, who must be a swordmaster not a swordsman, was carrying that great sword made by the legendary craftsman O Yezi like a decorative piece. So he went calling it a pearl necklace on a pig's neck. But the situation had become ridiculous. He had tried to teach him a lesson as a swordsman, but he ended up being humiliated instead. Mong Muyak glared at Mok Jiongun. If he backed down like this humiliation would really become set in stone. So, swish. Mong Muyak, gripping his sword hilt, raised his energy. Good. Let's have a proper duel dash. Before that, take this back. At that moment, Mok Jiongun threw something as if throwing a spear. It was none other than the sword he had taken from Mong Muyak. Whoosh. Swish swish swish. The sword flew to right in front of him in an instant. Just how strong was this bastard's inner force that the sword flew right in front of him in the blink of an eye? Just by looking at the speed one could guess its power. However, bam. The flying sword suddenly stopped in midair. Boing boing. Seeing the sword stop precariously right in front of him, Seop Chun couldn't hide his surprise. No way. He blocked that with his energy. The power imbued in the sword seemed to be no joke, so he thought he should avoid it, but he didn't expect him to be able to block it with just his energy. Mong Muyak's inner energy level seemed to have become much thicker than before. At this, Seop Chun shouted to Mong Muyak with amazement. Ha, Mong Muyak, did you eat centuries-old wild ginseng or something? However, it wasn't me. Mong Muyak said with a perplexed expression. Seop Chun tilted his head. What is he saying now? It wasn't him? What are you talking about? I'm saying it wasn't me who stopped the sword just now. What? At this, Seop Chun looked at Mok Jiongun, thinking it couldn't be. Huh. But Mok Jiongun was looking at Mong Muyak's sword floating in the air with a serious face, the smile gone from his face. It wasn't him either? What on earth is going on? He was puzzled, wondering what was going on when, swish. Huh. The sword. At that moment, the sword that had come out of Mong Muyak's scabbard on its own, which was floating in the air, charged towards Mok Jae-eun at a tremendous speed, cutting through the air. Swish swish swish. Mok Jae-eun's eyes looking at this turned sharp. The energy imbued in the flying sword was something he had never experienced before. The energy was moving the sword as if it were a living, breathing supreme swordsman. What kind of sorcery is this? As he was shocked, Chong Ryong's exclamation pierced his ears. It's the art of sword control. 1.